Over the years, I've done a bunch of videos on how fitness, strength and conditioning tie into martial arts and why it's good for you. I think it's actually an integral part of martial arts, because if you don't have a healthy and conditioned body, you're just not going to be able to perform well. But I have not really talked about stretching. I've mentioned it in passing here and there, but I don't really talk about stretching. And the biggest reason why is I don't really stretch. And the reason for that is that I think the general benefit of stretching is not high enough to chase after when I could be spending my time on some other things. We'll come back to what I use stretching for later, but for now, suffice it to say, I don't really stretch, and I don't enforce people to stretch. If it feels good, fine, do it, whatever. I just want you to understand what some of the pros and cons are, what it's actually doing, so that you can do things in a more informed manner. So when we start, we need to kind of talk about the first thing, which is stretching is a neuromuscular action. It is not in any way, shape, or form a mechanical action. You are not actually stretching out the connective tissue. You're not stretching the muscles, really, and you're sure as hell not stretching the joints. In fact, you do not want your joints to be overly mobile. Hypermobility is a medical condition, and it can lead to joint instability, which basically means you are not going to be able to hold stable position, and rapid changes under load do seem to contribute to injury in a non-trivial way. So hypermobility is a bad thing, right? There was a phrase that was going around years ago, I'm sure people still say it, where they say length equals strength. And not only is like lengthening your tissues not really a thing, but also no. There's no correlation to length equaling strength. We'll caveat that. We'll come back to that when we talk about strength. So if it's not mechanical, right, it's neuromuscular, what are you actually doing? What you're doing is you are actually trying to convince your body by holding a position that it is not going to injure itself. And this is why it's fairly important not to push the stretch into painful territory, because it's actually going to cue off your nervous system and work against you. There's actually a really good succinct video on this that I will link with all the resources on our Substack. He, of course, links to papers, so maybe I'll proxy link his papers as well. And that'll be on blacksun.substack.com, right? That's where we're putting all of our links now. Please go to Substack and become a subscriber. It is free to start. It's free forever, and there is a membership tier if you would like some of the super secret training stuff. So the next thing we have to look at is that stretching seems to be temporary. I don't have any necessarily any papers on this, but you all know somebody that has a persistent stretching routine and never really gains any range of motion. I definitely see it in the martial arts world all of the time. And then I can just say from personal experience, and yes, the plural of anecdote is not data, but from personal experience, I used to be able to do the splits. I can't do the splits anymore. It's not particularly important to me, so I don't care that much. But the fact is that flexibility goes away. It's not a set it and forget it, you achieve it and you're done. You have to continuously use that range of motion. And that actually seems in line with all of the other evidence, because if it's a neuromuscular thing, and it seems to be related to like injury and strength, then you may in fact find that it is temporary because you didn't actually do anything to build that range of motion and keep that range of motion. And that's one of the reasons why full range of motion exercise is important, because when bodybuilders lose flexibility, it's mostly because they're not using a full range of motion, and then they end up just losing it because they are not maintaining it, which is a mistake for bodybuilding too, because full range of motion actually has cool benefits. I'm 6'2", and this bag is just a little bit taller than me. Today I have not stretched at all, and I haven't thrown a single kick today. All right. So the next thing is that it does not prevent injury. They have studied this for at least the last 20 years. I've seen papers going back into, I want to say like 98, 99, something like that. But the thing is that, like, we've got even current meta-analyses and whatnot now that basically show that stretching does not prevent injury. And it seems to be mostly because injury is not related to range of motion. Injury is related to tissues that are not prepped to receive force, all of a sudden receiving force, and presumably rather suddenly receiving force. Basically, you're exceeding their load capacity and they get injured. And again, hypermobility is problematic because hypermobility makes your joints unstable, makes you more likely to rapidly lose stability and receive load in unprepped tissues and thus increase injury. But flexibility itself does not seem to prevent injury. But you know what does seem to prevent injury? There's a pretty strong correlation between injury reduction and strength. When you're stronger, you seem to have less injury. And that actually makes sense, because if injury is receiving force related, well, strength makes you more capable of receiving force. All right. So now let's come down to our methods, right? I put strength on the top. Let's go ahead and knock this out. So there's a couple of things here on strength that we need to talk about. One of them I didn't put down. We'll talk about that in a second. But the reason I put it under methods is that strength training actually has shown to improve range of motion as well as passive stretching. So there is a correlation to flexibility and strength, and it would seem to be that correlation is due to the fact that your body doesn't feel safe in a range of motion, thus it limits you. And so by gaining strength, it feels safer in that range of motion and allows you to move into that range of motion. That actually makes a ton of sense. This is why we see people who sometimes have difficulty hitting depth in a squat or touching their chest on bench or something like that. Over time, they're able to do these things without necessarily specifically stretching. And some of that is the weight resistance. As that goes up, it's going to force them into a further range of motion, provided they don't artificially stop themselves. And by gaining strength in that range of motion, it actually helps. There's actually been some really cool research more recently where they showed that isometrics at long muscle lengths actually do just as well or better than regular exercise, whereas at shortened muscle lengths, middle position or short position muscle lengths, basically do jack. So we know that isometric at longer muscle lengths has benefit. We know that full range of motion matters, and that may be again tied into those long muscle length, the full stretch position muscle lengths, because those are the ranges where we're weakest. And so by stimulating the fibers at the weak end, you force kind of everything to adapt. So there seems to be some real benefit there, and that's really, really cool. Which again draws into the idea that flexibility is actually strength related, kind of a byproduct of strength, and what you would maybe consider actually part of conditioning, right? Because if it's temporary, you don't hold on to it the way you hold on to physical muscle. It goes away more quickly. It goes away like your cardio does. So you may consider that your flexibility is something that you just have to get to a point and maintain. It's not something to chase endless progression on. And I think putting it in with your conditioning is a better idea. Now, as far as the more common methods of training for flexibility, the basic things we have are going to be passive and PNF stretching. The reason that dynamic and ballistic stretching are not in there is because dynamic and ballistic stretching basically don't have much support in the literature. They don't seem to do well by comparison, if at all. And by contrast, passive and PNF actually seem to kind of have a tug of war going on for who's better. But I am going to throw my hat in the ring of passive because it requires less setup. PNF stretching basically requires you to have a partner, and requires a little counting, relaxing, tensing, all this kind of stuff. PNF stretching is cool. And I mean, if that's really your jam and you really like it, that's great. But it doesn't seem to actually work any better than passive, and it requires more setup. So in my opinion, it's more costly for not enough more benefit. So passive stretching, and we're talking a very, very small amount of stretching. I want to say it was something like 5 or 10 minutes a week. Again, the resources will be linked. A week, not a day, not a session, a week. So you're talking about doing just a few minutes a day, a minute or two, like every day or every other day. And here's the other thing, right? Is you don't need to stretch everything all the time, right? If something doesn't feel like it's restrictive, there's probably no reason to stretch. If something does feel like it's restrictive, then you probably need to specifically target that thing and do that until you have range of motion, and then make sure that you work into your routine that you're using that range of motion consistently. Otherwise, it's just going to go back to kind of the way that it was. So the fact is that, like I said, I don't really stretch. When I do stretch, it's basically because something feels restricted. And it's usually because something feels like neurologically stiff, tight. Like if I have a seized up muscle because I strained too hard or something like that. Stretching seems to, because it's neuromuscular, seems to help calm down my nervous system and make it feel a little less bad. It doesn't really restore any range of motion or anything. That it happens with healing whatever that problem was, but it seems to help just abate the symptoms a little bit. And that's basically what I use stretching for. Now, here's the other thing, right? I might not be able to do the splits anymore, but I can throw a head kick cold, right? And the reason for that is I use that skill set. I don't stretch, but I use that skill set constantly, and not even daily, but fairly regularly throughout the week in and week out, because it's my job to teach martial arts and to be in the gym. And so it is a persistent skill that I have. Now, if you find that you want to be able to throw a higher kick and you can't do that, there may not be a reliable strength training way for you to get that range of motion. So you may actually have to do a little bit of stretching, but keep in mind, right, go check out the resources, look at the specific protocols that are mentioned in the resources, and it'll give you an idea of how to kind of stretch out the range of motion that you need. Just use targeted stretching for the thing that you need, and do so in a way that doesn't actually do kind of like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 1 step back kind of approach, which some of the more aggressive things seem to do. So that's kind of the long and short of it. I don't have a ton to say on stretching. If you want to stretch, if you like stretching, if stretching feels good, go ahead and do it. Just don't be fooled into thinking there's more return on on investment than there is, because there's really not a huge return on investment. So I think that's going to be it for the stretching video. I'm probably not going to give you a list of my favorite stretches because I don't have any. So you'll have to go out and seek what you're looking for there. And again, the biggest takeaway here is if something feels restrictive, go ahead and stretch or find strength training exercises that will help you increase that range of motion within reason. Do not try to become hypermobile. And then just use and maintain that range of motion for the duration of, the rest of your life. And that should be sufficient. If you have a medical condition that is precluding you from all of this advice, obviously listen to your doctor, right? I am not a doctor and I cannot give you medical advice. So, deal with that. That's between you and your medical professionals. So there's nothing left to say. That's what I have to say about it. So I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share this with your friends or anybody else who might be interested in this kind of content. If you happen to be in the Metro Phoenix area, come in for a class or just stop in to say hi. We'd love to meet you. Definitely check out our socials and our website that has all of our contact information and all of the other relevant information. And more than anything, check out our Substack. Our Substack will be containing all of the links that we use to cite and reference in our videos, as well as exclusive training content that will be available for premium members. Memberships are cheap, but you can also sign up for free, and we do have articles for free, and we will have more free articles available for you. It is a fantastic platform for what we are doing here, and we hope to see you over there. So I will talk to you guys later, and look out for the next one. Good journey.